Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to explain to you how to answer a range of population and development exam questions. As I explain each one, I'm going to be giving you lots of information that you can use to answer the question. So this helps you revise this topic. What I suggest you do is at the end of each answer that I give for each question, that you pause it and you try to note them down. What you could do is you could write down the question on a piece of paper and then write down what I say, or you could write down the question on a card and then write down the key points on the reverse side and see if you can remember. Key thing is, don't just listen to me. At the end of each one, you should be actively thinking about the key points that I've made. Right, in this question, which comes from the 2016 past paper, which you will be able to find on the homepage of this revision site, this question is, what are the reasons for falling death rates worldwide? Now, because this is a worldwide question, it's not a developed or developing, we can really talk about anything that is causing the gradual decline in death rates. So let's get started. I'm going to give you 7 or 8 kind of key points. Right, so factor number 1 is that we are progressively getting access across the world to clean water. And more people are getting access to clean water, which means that waterborne diseases like cholera are becoming less and less common. Second reason is more and more people are gaining food security across the world because we're becoming more productive and effective at growing food. Because we're able to feed more people and there's less people being malnourished as a percentage of the world's population, which means less illness and potential death. Third reason, more and more children are being born in proper, healthy, adequate sanitary conditions like hospitals. Because more children are being born in these sorts of environments, there's less likely to be infant mortality. Less children are going to die because there'll be doctors present in hygiene environments, and that's another reason for death rates falling. So the 3 sort of factors I've given you so far are probably more relevant to developing countries at this particular stage. If we also start to think about factors more relevant to developed countries, we could start talking about the factor that in wealthy countries, they now have quite advanced medical systems that can treat people for a range of illnesses, meaning that we're living longer and therefore less likely to die. On top of that, because we in developed countries now have pension systems that look after us in our old age, that means that we are cared for and don't need to work our entire life, and that means we're likely to live to a much older age. Okay, other factors affecting our death rates is that more and more of us are living in nicer housing conditions, safer housing conditions, and therefore there's less disease like tuberculosis that might come from living in really poor housing conditions, and that also means there's fewer of us dying from that. A couple of other factors, we have now worldwide vaccination programs against a range of diseases that used to kill people in large numbers. Because of that, our children are being born and being vaccinated and therefore can never die of these killer diseases. Another key reason for this big decline, especially in the last few years, is the fact that we're now knowing a lot more about one of the world's biggest killers, HIV. And because we now know a lot more about HIV, there's a lot more education about things like safe sex and how to prevent catching this disease. And we're educating far more people about not just this disease, but other diseases. And because of this increase in education in general, people are able to reduce the risk of dying. So I've outlined about 8 reasons, referencing some diseases whilst doing that as examples, which would be a really good piece of advice. And if you're revising this after having done the health topic, you can use some of your kind of ideas from the health topic also to help you revise population. Okay, so that's the answer to the 2016 exam question. Let me now have a look at the 2017, which you can find also on the home page of this revision site. Now, this is a really common exam question. You see this in a lot of exams, and it's explaining the pattern. Now, you might be asked to describe the pattern, in which case you'd be talking about parts of the world like it's a lower population density in the northern part of Africa. In India, there's a much higher population density. In northern Russia, there is a much lower population density. And if you're actually given the density per kilometer, you'd be using those figures instead. But because this is an explain question, you're now having to give reasons, and they must be both physical and human. So really, what are the reasons for there being more people in places like here, and why are there less than here? So let's just explore some sort of 7 or 8 reasons, and I'll split them into physical and human, giving you 4 of each. So common physical reasons. There are far fewer people living in, for example, the Sahara Desert. First of all, because of extreme temperatures make human habitation very difficult. It's difficult for people to survive in such hot temperatures. Second reason is because of the extreme heat, there's a lack of water in this part of the world, which makes agriculture very difficult. Because people can't grow food, it's less likely human population is going to be living there. Third reason, there are very few people living in the Himalayas because this is a highly mountainous region. This is this area here. And because of the high altitude and the steep slopes, it's very difficult to navigate through this landscape. It's very inaccessible. It's also very difficult to grow food because of the steep slopes are not conducive to growing crops. Okay, why are there very few people living in the Amazon rainforest? We can see this lower densities here. This is because it's dense jungle, therefore it's very poor access. Also because it's a very wet environment, as this area is prone to flooding, which makes large numbers of people living in this particular area far more difficult. Thinking about why lots of people live in certain areas to do with physical reasons, we could say that there's a lot of people living in Europe because the climate's far more temperate. That means it's not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry. This means it's perfect for living, but it's also perfect for growing crops. It also means the soils are going to develop much better and therefore can sustain better crop growth, which means more people can be supported. If we think about some human reasons, first of all, there's lots of people living on the coast, in coastal areas. That's because coastal areas suit trade, global trade. And that means that those industries are going to be attracted to those areas, which will attract people. Okay. There's also lots of people living in some parts like this. Let's just pick an area here in Southeast Asia, partly because the climate's so nice that it's generated a tourist industry, and because of a tourist industry being common in that area, tourists are attracted. People are attracted to it in the tourist-based industries. Making a living off it, which encourages more people to be there. Finally, and the final human reason why there's a lot of people living in some areas, you could pick, for example, there might be some people living in very hot regions of the world, like the Middle East, and that's because we've developed technologies like air conditioning that allow us to live in very hot environments. We've overcome some of the barriers that restrict our living in those areas. Okay, so in this tutorial, I've specifically answered some questions to do with the 2016 and 2017 past papers.